Hello, everyone. It is 11:11. I always seem to go live at around 11:11. Good morning to you all. Good evening, good afternoon for those of you who are in the States where it's Thursday. It is Friday, December the 12th here in Melbourne, Australia. I've just come back from a really big walk with my dog. It is really hot out there. It's about 30 degrees, which is really nice because it is summer. Summer's been a little slow coming to Melbourne. But we've just come back from an awesome walk together. So I'm feeling very fresh and ready to chat with you guys on this second last live of 2025. So hence why I've still got my cap on. I didn't have time to get changed, but I figure you guys don't care. I don't really care about stuff like that. So I like to be about as unfiltered as I can be with these things. So for those of you who don't know me, Fiona Lucas here, coming to you live on Facebook and YouTube. And I'm here to answer any questions that you have about relationships, life, our own funny little human, as per the book that I've written, available on Amazon. And just as a quick reminder, if you have left me a review on Amazon, if you've purchased a copy and left me a review, I have a gorgeous meditation that I will send out to you free if you have done that. So just a reminder for those of you who've left me a review, there is a lovely meditation that goes really well with the book that we will send you for free. So just send it out to us. All right. So hi, Penny. Nice to see you, honey. Thanks for saying hi. I was playing around with some of the settings here on this live streaming software, and I'm trying out a new thing where comments appear on the screen. I was also trying out some of the holiday frames. I don't know if you can do it live. Let me see if I can click it. It was pretty extreme, but yep, there you go. We've got this as a frame that I can have while I'm chatting to you guys, a Christmas theme, or we have this Christmas theme. I'm not sure how some of them, it's pretty funny. I was playing around with some of these things before we went on here, but I figured I'd just go neutral today. Maybe leave that for next week. Hey, Lee. Hello, darling. Hi, Melinda. Thanks for saying hi. Hey, Mark, a bit more chilly here in Alberta, Canada, minus 23. Oof, I can't even. So it's almost like you're almost 100% in the opposite direction to us. We're 30 above, you're almost 30 below. That's just wild, isn't it? Yeah, it's really warm today. It's lovely, actually. Really, I can't complain. Might even go to the beach this afternoon, have a swim. I live about 5 minutes drive from our local beach, which is gorgeous. So I almost recorded a live for you guys in the Relatable group this morning. I just ran out of time while I was walking my dog along the beach. It's just beautiful. Anyway, so if you have a question, pop it in the comments below and I will do my absolute best to answer it for you. And, as always with these lives, I reflect upon things that have taken place during the week with my Relatable students, with my clients, and things that have occurred in my own life. And we had our last Wednesday live call on this week for the Relatable students for this year, our last Wednesday. We've got a couple more Monday calls, but this is our last Wednesday one for the year. And I was asking everyone to reflect on what some of their biggest insights have been for the year. And, insights are something that we talk about a lot in Relatable because they are what do the heavy lifting when it comes to creating change within a human being, when it comes to our perspective, when it comes to the lens with which we view life. They are what do the heavy lifting. And I think there's an enormous misunderstanding about that out there. We tend to, if we're looking at change through traditional therapeutic means, if we're looking at change through the way we've learned to associate change, it looks like we are the ones doing the heavy lifting when it comes to change. Yes, it looks like we are the ones doing the hard work, the hard yards. And that's why it can look like change can look like this very difficult, heavy thing. And we miss you too, Penny. Have you seen the emails about the retreats? I've got 2 retreats for Relatable students for next year, one in Melbourne on the peninsula and one in the US. So hopefully you can come to one of those. They're open to all previous students and current students. So I'll be running 2 of those. Promise you next year the Melbourne one is locked in on the beautiful peninsula here. So hopefully you can join us. So I wanted to talk about that for a second because insights are something that I think we don't have a deep enough understanding of. And when we're under the impression that change is up to us, which is kind of the old way of viewing change, right? We would call that the old psychology. And what we talk about a lot in Relatable is what I would call new psychology or newer psychology. And that is that it's not us that is doing the heavy lifting when it comes to change. It's not you that's doing the heavy lifting when it comes to change. It's not you that has to fight against yourself or manage yourself or overcome yourself or suppress yourself. And when I say yourself, I mean memories, the past, emotions, behavior. The beautiful thing about an insight, and when you understand them, is that insights do the heavy lifting. They truly do. And when you understand the way an insight works, that's awesome that you're in, Penny. I love it. Thank you. Feels like minus 17 in Ontario. Oh, you Canadians do it tough in winter. That's all I can say. But it would be amazing. I'd love to experience a white Christmas. I've never done that in my life. It would be really cool. But that'd be about enough for me. Then I'd have to come back to summer in Oz. But we are kind of led to believe that we have to do the heavy lifting when it comes to change. And there's something so profoundly beautiful and so much ease that's created within us when we understand that it is always insight that's doing the heavy lifting, right? And then, in Relatable, we talk a lot about what drives insight, where it comes from and what it looks like and all of those kinds of things, right? Now, you might be sitting there and you might be thinking, okay, that's great, Fiona, but what does that have to do with our relationships? Well, it's got everything to do with our relationships, everything. I was sitting down with one of my youngest son last night, and we were just having a conversation about some things that hadn't been working out for him lately. And once his mind had settled, and his mind was kind of racing, and one of the things we learn in Relatable, and I've learned, and this when it comes to clients, with my husband, with any of the people in my life, is that it's really important to let someone's mind settle. If you want to have a conversation where there is a level of connectedness, understanding, listening, all of those kinds of things. And his mind was racing a bit. I waited for it to settle. And then we were able to have a really beautiful conversation, because I said to him, can you see that through those things that haven't gone so well for you, that there are things that you've learned that you could learn from those things? And he said, and in particular, one was with a relationship that had broken down, that he'd been quite hurt about. And I said, what is it that you think you needed to learn? And so we were talking about that, and he was sharing those things. And then I was talking to him about what insights look like and what they mean, because he was really receptive to it. I don't push these things on anyone in my family unless they're open and receptive to it. And I said, could you see the insights that you had around this in this situation? He said, well, now that you talk about it, Mum, now that you look at it that way, yeah, I can. And I said, what have they taught you? And then we went through what they've taught me. And I'm not going to go into the detail because I'm not going to betray my son's trust, right? But what that meant was, at the end of that conversation, he was so reflective and calm, and he was actually really grateful for what had happened and the things that he'd learned, because he could see how that's going to help him in the next phase of his life. And I think, when you understand the power of an insight, it's very calming for our human, which is very good for our relationships, because some of the biggest challenges people have in their relationships is difficulty regulating their emotions when things don't go their way, being able to listen when they don't agree with what someone is saying, getting over things, right? Getting over things that have happened, getting over the past, getting over memories, getting over situations. So letting things go and getting over things. And then they struggle with the fact that because they don't understand or don't factor in state of mind, which is very, 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 very important in our relationships. To me, that's the missing link. When you don't factor that in, they make things mean something that don't actually mean that. And then they hold it against their partner, or they hold it against themselves. And this gets in the way of their ability to connect and to move forward, because every time a similar thing happens, they're right back into the past and bringing that into this moment of now. They're right back into this always happens with us. Oh, this is typical of you, and kind of landing in those this is how it is states of mind. And when we land in those states of mind, we get stuck and we just cycle around and cycle around and cycle around and cycle around, right? And that really affects the level of feeling we're in with someone. You know, one of the things that I shared on Wednesday night when I was talking about insight and I was talking about some of the things that I've learned is that I shared, and this may sound strange to some of you, my relatable students understood where I was coming from, but if you haven't, you know, got the understanding that I teach, this might sound a little strange. But I said to my students, I said, you know, one of the things I've learned from having this understanding in my life, and one of the big insights that I've had, and I've had many, but one of the big insights that I've had is that there is nothing my husband could do that would change the feeling I have towards him. Nothing. Even if, and hear me here, this is where it may be challenging for some of you. Even if he was to come to me and say, I've cheated on you, or I have a gambling problem, or any of those things, some of the things that would have some of you say, I could never forgive that, I could never let that go. Now, please understand one thing. When I say that it would never change, I would never change the feeling. There's nothing that would ever change the feeling that I'm in, or that I have towards him. It doesn't necessarily mean that I might stay married to him if something, you know, was to happen that was a deal breaker for me, right? But irrespective of that, there is nothing that would change the feeling I have towards my husband. And I can't tell you how incredible that feels. That's an incredible feeling. To know that there is nothing that would change that. I will always feel the way that I feel, and I will always be in a good feeling. And the power of that is so calming and freeing, or the knowingness of it. It's like there's this whole chunk of thinking that I think so many of us have in the back of our minds that we don't know that we have, that we're living with every day, that kind of gets in the way. And I think a lot of us have these thoughts of in the backs of our mind, and maybe even not something that they're consciously aware of. Maybe something they're unconsciously aware of. But a lot of people in the back of their mind worry about things that haven't happened or could happen, and then live in the feeling and the thinking of that. And then that's just playing around in the back of their mind. And so, you know, when you have a knowingness about something, it takes that all away. And so there's just more of you on offer. There's more opportunity to feel good. And, you know, if this is not one of the major keys in a relationship, is the ability to feel good with another person. That might sound really simplistic to some of you, but I cannot tell you how important it is, because a lot of people don't know how to do that. It might sound really basic and easy, but a lot of people don't know how to do that. They don't know how to feel good with someone. And I'm not saying it's anybody's fault, but this is because we don't understand things like state of mind, how things work, the power of insight that does the heavy lifting when it comes to change. It's like we don't know how to do it because we kind of get in the way, or we're holding so tight onto the steering wheel, or we're holding so tight onto the past, we're holding so tight onto our memories and our fears, and they become like this wall around us. And they become like this barrier between us and connection, between us and life, between us and depth of feeling. And we don't even know that they're there. You know, the amount of people that I work with and students that come and do the Relatable program, and then will send me a message and say, I did not know how much I was carrying that was in the way. I just had no idea. And that's why I often say that this understanding makes the invisible visible. And that's a wonderful thing. Because when something that's invisible to you becomes visible, now all of a sudden you have the opportunity to create change, to choose something else. And to me, that is what emotional freedom's all about. And so we were sharing, some of our biggest insights, the things that we'd seen. Because the other thing that I was saying to everyone on Wednesday was, sometimes we can forget we've had an insight, especially when your life becomes the baseline of that. So, for example, my baseline with my husband is I am always in a good feeling with him. Like it's pretty rare that I'm not. And when I'm not, I understand what's going on. And so it's not a concern to me. Do you know what I mean? I don't have any thinking around it. But I'm always in a good feeling with him, irrespective of what's going on. And so that's my baseline. Now, that was not my baseline. My baseline once upon a time was frustration, resentment, self-righteousness, mixed in with good feelings from time to time. But so my baseline was not that. Now, this has been my baseline for so long now that you kind of forget about the fact that this used to be my baseline. And so I was just spending time being in appreciation of that, being in the gratitude of that. Because that's my baseline now. I'm just so grateful for that. I will forever be grateful for that. That is the baseline that I get to operate from. I don't operate from here anymore. And if I have moments of it, they're pretty fleeting and they're gone. And I don't really have any thinking about it. This is my baseline. And so when you can appreciate your own progress, when you can appreciate the insights that you've had and then be in the feeling of that, as I often say to my students, being in a good feeling it compounds on itself. It's a compounding thing. It's like compounding interest. It compounds. Being in a loving state of mind compounds. Being in a dissatisfied state of mind compounds. Right? And so many people come to me and start relatable, and they're in a very dissatisfied state of mind, and they have been for years. And they may not realize it, but that's realize the extent of it because that's become their baseline. And so we were talking about things like that, the power of insight, being grateful for the insights that we've had, and some of the insights that we've shared as we've been on this journey. And I just think that's such an important thing to remember and look at, especially as you're coming up to the end of the year, and we're reflective about how far we're reflective about the year that we've had, what's gone on, what all of that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to just talk about this a little bit with you guys today, because understanding things like what creates change, what truly creates change, then living in an appreciation of that changes our entire physiology. And when our physiology changes, our energy changes, and that impacts everything and everyone around you. And as you come up to Christmas Day, for those of you who celebrate Christmas, or holiday season where you're spending time with people you don't see for a while, when your energy is in a good space, it will impact everyone in the room. Even if it's people that you don't normally enjoy being around, or maybe they're people you don't feel as comfortable around, it is possible for you to be in a completely different energy around that. And that comes from not thinking about what that person is or isn't doing, but your level of understanding of how things work, how your reality is generated, things like state of mind, insight, all of that kind of stuff. Because it generates a sense of calm within you that becomes implacable at times, right? It becomes unaffected by what's going on externally, because you're drawing on the understanding, and that is what grounds us. A lot of people think what grounds them is something that exists out here, whether it's another person's behavior, whether it's a situation, whether it's, you know what I mean, a lot of external factors. And I can tell you, coming up to Christmas, I'm hosting at my place. I'll have a lot of people at my home on Christmas Day. There'll be a lot going on. I'll probably be running around trying to cook this and serve this and do all of those sorts of things. But I'm going to remember to ground myself, and I'll ground myself based on the fact that I understand how things work. That's what will ground me. And I know that when I'm in a feeling of, when I'm in a loving state of mind, that is going to ripple out to everyone around me. And I know that I can access that even if I've got 10 things on the go, or let's just say the Christmas turkey doesn't quite work out the way that I thought it would, or something goes wrong on the day, which it probably will. It's probably high chance of that happening when you've got that many things on the go. And so I guess that was something I wanted to talk to you about. It's like appreciating the power of insight, appreciating the things that create emotional freedom in us. Because when you appreciate and see those things, like I said, it's incredibly calming for our human being. And this is fantastic for our relationships, absolutely fantastic for our relationships. So I'd love all of you to know that when it comes to creating change, it's not up to you, if that makes sense. I mean, it is in a way, but in another way, it's not. There's something else always assisting us, always assisting us, always there no matter what, always giving you access to something else, a deeper sense of wisdom, a deeper feeling about something, a deeper sense of knowing. You know, we were also talking about on Wednesday how things always work themselves out, right? Far more than people appreciate. Things work themselves out. But we're not taught this kind of stuff. We're kind of taught the other, that, you know, it's kind of up to me or up to us or up to you, that it's on your shoulders, that you've got to be the one, all of this kind of stuff, right? And that can become a very heavy burden. And what that I find that happens when people look at life that way, especially when we're in our relationships, is people overanalyze themselves. And this is not healthy for people. It's not healthy to anyone. When you're overanalyzing yourself, it's very hard for you to create connection. When you're overanalyzing yourself, you're in your head more than your heart. And you tend to be more judgmental of yourself. And when you're more judgmental of self, you're more judgmental of others, because whatever's in here is what you will generate out here. It's just how it works. It's just how it works. Hey, Brian. Hi, nice to see you. It's really good to hear from you, Brian. I really hope that you're well. I hope all is well in your world. We've got, I'm not sure if you've seen the emails, but we've got a Relatable retreat coming up in May next year. So I really hope that you can make it. I'd love to see you in person, Brian. It's on May the 1st to May the 3rd on the Mornington Peninsula here. Hey, Lisa. Before learning this understanding from you, and still sometimes, I live mostly in the feeling of a habit of believing my crappy thoughts and stories. Yeah, we all do. And that really, really gets in the way of our relationships. Like it really, really does. Living in the feeling of that, way more than you can ever possibly imagine. And it is far more impactful on your relationships when you can see that than any technique you will ever learn. Promise you. I promise you. This is the difference that makes the difference, right? Everything else is kind of like potentially the cherry on top, right? But you don't need a cherry on top once you've got this. I'm telling you, you just don't. It's really simple. It's not complicated. And it is, in my mind, the missing piece, the missing link on every level. Hi, Susan. Hi, darling. I hope you're well. It's always a pleasure to hear from you, Susan. Always a pleasure. So I'd love to know if this is making sense to people. I might be speaking of something it could potentially be a bit too abstract. So if it is, let me know. I'm mindful of that on some of these lives, that I don't go too abstract and lose people. I'm not sure who that is. Wales ? Don't know. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Someone on YouTube. Okay, so I do have a question here that I'm going to share. Just one second. All right. Okay. Hi, Fiona. Thank you so much for doing these lives. I'm not always able to tune in live, but I always watch the recordings. I'm finding them so incredibly helpful. You're welcome. And really different to everything else out there. It's like a breath of fresh air for my for my constantly busy mind. Okay, you're welcome. So my question is, I constantly second guess myself in my relationship. Is this my intuition telling me something's wrong, or is this just my insecurities talking? How do I tell the difference? Great question. I'm constantly second guessing myself in my relationship. Is this my intuition telling me something's wrong, or is this just my insecurity talking? How do I tell the difference? Okay. This is a really good question. And one of the reasons why I think it's such a great question is because I think so many people can relate to this question, right? So many people can relate to it. And B, I think it helps us to understand the difference between, or helps us understand what trusting ourselves actually means. So many of us have been taught to trust our gut, so to speak, trust our gut instinct. But we've kind of been taught this, but not really understanding what that actually means or what that actually entails, right? And I guess if I could give you a little mini lesson in this for now, and there are a number of terms that we can use for intuition. So trusting our gut, wisdom, having a knowing of something. There are different words. Don't worry about the words. It's kind of what I'm pointing to rather than the words itself. But one of the biggest differentiators of understanding intuition or wisdom versus insecurities is that intuition doesn't feel frantic. It doesn't loop. It doesn't need evidence or reassurance. When we have a real knowingness of something, there's this very quiet, grounded, settled quality to it, right? There's this very quiet, grounded, settled quality to it because it doesn't have anything to prove to you. It doesn't need to justify. It doesn't need to explain. Insecurity, on the other hand, or insecurities, they're loud. They're boisterous. They're bossy. Right? They have a sense of self-importance. It sounds like they're telling you off. They can have a self-righteous tone to them. And insecurities really want you to gather a lot of evidence. They're fantastic evidence gatherers. They want you to gather proof, to check and double check. And they love it when you analyze. And it can often sound like, but what if, and I need to figure this out, and maybe if I just think about it one more time, but I like this, but what about that? And you kind of feels like you're bouncing around. It's like bounce, 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 bounce. And so when you're bouncing, you're second guessing everything. Wisdom doesn't do that. Because wisdom doesn't need to prove something to you. Insecurities do. Wisdom doesn't demand the way that insecurities do. Insecurities, oh, I wouldn't put up with that. You've got to do something about that. Oh, that's not okay. Yeah, remember last time, this time. Like it goes round and round and round. It goes really fast. And it can bring up the past multiple times. Intuition doesn't operate that way. And this is why we talk so much about the power of a quiet mind. And for those of you who are at the Relatable Retreat, you will really feel that over the 3 days. It's beautiful. Because, when we're in a quiet mind, like when our mind quiets down, and I shared with you at the start of the live, the conversation I had with my son last night, I waited for his mind to quieten down, and then we started talking. And often this will happen if I'm working with a client. They might start off and their mind's up here and it's racing. And I need to wait for their mind to quieten down a little before we can actually really have the kind of conversation that I want to have. And that's okay. Like, it's not a problem. I just know the feeling of a busy racing mind versus the feeling of a quiet mind. I can feel it energetically. And so I just have to wait, and then we proceed. So, real knowing, that real knowingness of something is easier to hear when your mind's quiet. That's when we feel most connected to it. And so this is why I talk about the power of reflection so much, because if you don't have reflection time in your life, and people don't these days, they don't, it's almost like, I've got to spare 5 minutes. What can I stuff into it? What can I fill it with? Right? That's kind of how we are with things. That when we are stuffing ourselves full, it's much harder for us to hear wisdom. It's much harder for us to hear our intuition. It's much harder for us to hear the whispering of our own soul. And I cannot tell you how important that is in your relationships. Cannot tell you how important that is in your relationships. It's the everything. Your capacity for that, your knowingness of it, it's the everything, and it calms everything down. That's why it feels so good. People talk about feeling lighter, feeling freer. Where the walls come down, their heart softens. And they just find it so much easier to connect. It's like letting love in to your life, right? So having a deep knowingness of those two things and the difference between them is very, very, very important. Because here's the thing, right? If you don't allow time for reflection, and reflection is giving yourself space, reflection time, without an agenda. Without an agenda. So, for example, reflection time would not look like this. Okay, I've got 15 minutes. I'm going to sit outside and I'm going to work this out. That's not reflection time. Why? Because you have an agenda. I've got to work this out, right? Reflection time is allowing our minds to wander, and just to wander wherever they like to be. This is why we talk about playtime with children as such a fundamentally important thing, unstructured playtime, where they get bored, and then their mind, their imagination is able to kick in and wander and take them to gorgeous places. The importance of that in children is just as important in an adult. Just as important in an adult. But we don't allow ourselves time for that. Now, I can tell you that the days where I have reflection time, and look, I schedule it in every day because it's like a non-negotiable in my life. But the days wherever for whatever reason, it doesn't happen, I've just contradicted myself. I know that, but as a whole, that's what I do. The days where that doesn't happen, I notice I don't have as much emotional capacity with my husband. I'm not as patient. The feeling isn't quite the same. I don't have the same emotional bandwidth. So I notice a difference in how I show up to him and how I react and respond. And so please know, you've got to understand that if you're someone who's always in a busy mind and you don't allow that space for that, there will be not as much available to you, to the people in your life, when they see you at the end of the day. You just won't have as much on offer for them or available to them. These are the things that make the difference. They do. Far more than any of the stuff that you're taught out there about what matters in relationships. These are the things that make the difference. It's these subtleties that make all the difference because they change the feeling. And the feeling is everything. So I hope that helps. That's a great question. And if you've just tuned in, feel free to listen to the recording once it's up. And but basically, you know, I know for many of you, there are people who second guess things in a relationship. They second guess themselves, they second guess a relationship, they second guess the other person. And so this question was related to that. So one that I know many of you will relate to. Okay, everybody. So next Friday is my final live for 2025, and I'm having a decent break. So I won't be back live until, because it's summer here in Australia, but my first live back will be January 17th. Okay, my last live of the year will be, so it'll be basically a month break. My last live will be December 19th, and then there won't be one until January 17th. So if you have a question that you want me to answer, please send it in. I will make sure any outstanding questions are answered next Friday, so they're not carried on until the following year. I will stay live until I've answered them all, so they will get answered. So if you do have a question that you want me to answer, get it in so that I can get it on the list for next week, because the next opportunity won't be until January 17th in 2026. Hey, Kirsten, nice to hear from you, darling. Oh, I'm so glad that you found us as well, beautiful lady. Hi, Jody. Hello, lovely. Hi, Alison. Thanks for saying hi, everybody. All right, thanks so much for being here, everyone. I will see you next Friday for our final Friday live of 2026. Take care, everyone. Ciao.